All right, welcome to this session entitled It's on Us, West Virginia, to change the story on child sexual abuse. If you have found yourself in the wrong session, please click on the session in the toolbar on the left of your screen, and that will take you to a list of sessions occurring at this time. But we are glad that you have joined us for this session. CEUs for LPCs, school psychologists, addiction and prevention, and social workers have all been approved. So after the conference, you will receive an email that has a link to an online evaluation, and you will be responsible for completing an evaluation for each session that you attend. And after you complete the evaluation for each of those sessions, you will be able to download your CEU certificate. Attendance certificates will also be available by completing the evaluation. To ask questions during this session, please click over in the right side of your screen. I will be monitoring both the chat and the Q&A, and we'll let Deb and Nikki know if any questions pop up. So I'd like to give a big thank you to Deborah Benasso and Nikki Godfrey for presenting this valuable content this afternoon. Deborah Lopez Benasso has served as the Education Coordinator or SANE Coordinator for the West Virginia Foundation for Rape Information and Services, the state's Sexual Assault Coalition, for the last 24 years. As the Education SANE Coordinator for West Virginia FRIS, Deborah works closely with prevention educators in the rape centers, providing trainings and working to reduce violence through primary prevention education efforts. And it has been a pleasure to work with both Deborah and Nikki. Deborah works closely with the Sexual Assault Nurse Examiners Initiative and the SAFE Commission, and has been instrumental in developing training opportunities for nurses wanting to practice as SANE to ensure a victim-centered response to victims of sexual assault. She is a member of the SAFE Commission Standard Data and Training Committees, serves on the Children's Justice Task Force and Child Sexual Abuse Work Group, and is a board member for both SHIELD Reporting Initiative and CASA of Marion County. Nikki Godfrey has worked for the West Virginia Foundation for Rape Information and Services, the state Sexual Assault Coalition, for over 10 years. As Assistant State Coordinator, Nikki is committed to addressing social norms and oppressive systems to prevent violence and improving response to survivors to mitigate harm. Nikki graduated from WVU with a master's in social work and is a licensed social worker in West Virginia. Prior to joining West Virginia FRIS, Nikki worked for the Department of Health and Human Resources as a child protective service worker, providing services to children who experienced abuse and neglect, and worked with high-risk families in an effort to prevent abuse. She served as a volunteer advocate for Hope Incorporated and the Harrison County CASA program from 2009 to 2014, and now serves on the board of directors for the Harrison County CASA program. Nikki is passionate about working with and supporting organizations, both personally and professionally, that have invested interest in providing cultural responsive services to marginalized populations. So I really appreciate the expertise and the years of experience that these two ladies bring, and I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Stephanie. I would just say that as we get started, I want you to know that probably the most meaningful work that I've done in my lifetime, and I've been in education 12 years in the classroom and 24 plus at FRIS, has really been working on this child issue. And I believe that my hope is rooted in the fact that I want to bring others along on this journey to keep kids safe. And I've done it for my grown children, for my 4 beautiful grandchildren, and then for all the children that I'll never meet, but I hope that the work will be impactful in their world. And so as we talk today about some tough issues, please know that we want you to thoughtfully consider your role in changing the story on child sexual abuse. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
There's been some really great sessions today, so I'm curious for those who are attending this one, how many of you attended the Trauma in Today's Classroom with Christy? And you can use the chat box to let us know. Also, before we talk a little bit about FRIS, we like to say who we are because we're not sure if folks know who we are. And let us know, are you an educator, administrator, health educator, parent or caregiver, higher education staff, counselor, mental health professional? Let us know in the chat. We want to know who we're chatting with today. So FRIS works with the rape crisis centers and other allied professionals to strengthen intervention and prevention programs in the state to address sexual violence, dating violence, human trafficking, and stalking. We also have technical assistance and training that we provide to a lot of professionals like advocates, law enforcement, sexual assault nurse examiner, prosecutors, and others who work in the field. We also offer a lot of free resources to organizations, schools, colleges, and the community. Most of those are free and on our website at fris.org. We provide training and technical assistance, but we also have an e-learning site that's currently under development to upgrade everything to be more e-learning friendly. However, all of our modules are on there, and you can find that at SASTA, S-A-S-T-A, sasta.fris.org. We also work closely, as Stephanie mentioned, with prevention education specialists at the rape crisis centers. They provide prevention programming that covers a variety of topics, and they mainly focus around 3-year-old pre-K through higher education and community prevention. So we don't have a lot of time to spend together today, but we're really excited. Our hope is to give you 5 steps to understanding how we can each take part in preventing child sexual abuse and share resources and networking opportunities to continue the work, to continue the conversations. We want to talk a little bit about identifying concerning behaviors, intervening, and how to help a child, and also provide you with more since we only have an hour. We want to talk a little bit about what primary prevention actually means. Prevention can happen on 3 levels in a nutshell. It includes stopping the violence before it ever has a chance to happen, immediately responding to reduce the harm, and also implementing protective factors to stop it from happening again. So we want to ask you again a little bit about you all. Let us know in the chat, on a scale of 1 to 10, what's your knowledge on child sexual abuse prevention? 1, little to no knowledge. 5, have an understanding, or 10, you actively and confidently implement prevention strategies. So give us a number, 1 through 10.
And Nikki, while we're waiting for those answers, we have a lot of school folks with us today, from counselors to elementary teachers to high school teachers. And many of them work with trauma and attended the trauma sessions earlier.
Great. Some of the stuff that Debbie's going to talk about later really builds on the information that Christy provided in the trauma piece. So for the last several years, so much of the conversation around child sexual abuse prevention has been, how can we reach more kids, whether that's in school or through youth serving organizations or other programs, and how can we streamline prevention in West Virginia? What can that look like? Last year, the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Work Group was formed to strengthen these efforts. The work group is one of 3 specialized groups to focus on prevention. We also have a disability-focused work group and the Intercollegiate Council Against Sexual Violence, which has been around since the early 2000s. The statewide It's On Us West Virginia initiative has been implemented on college campuses in West Virginia since 2016. During the height of the pandemic, a website was created to provide social emotional learning lessons for K through 6th grades and resources for parents and the community. We're expanding our statewide efforts to streamline preventions in daycares, pre-K, and K through 12. Our goal is to provide support to schools, parents and caregivers, communities, social and youth serving organizations, and others to improve the lives of West Virginians and reduce the occurrence of sexual violence. So what exactly would it look like if we all work together? The video we're about to watch really highlights the need to identify the root causes of public health problems and address it on various levels.
Imagine a warm, sunny afternoon. Suddenly, You spot someone in the river being swept downstream and struggling to stay afloat. Without hesitation, you jump into the river and help the person to shore. As you help that person dry off, you hear another cry for help. Someone else is being swept downstream. Immediately, you jump into the water again and pull out this second person. This scenario continues all afternoon. As you pull someone safely to land, you have to jump back in and save someone else. Finally, you say, "I can't go on like this," and walk upstream to see what's happening. As you walk upstream, you warn other bystanders. "People are falling in the river. Please help them. Tell everyone you know." Finally, you find the problem. You notice a large hole in a bridge which is causing people to fall in. Something must be done. First, you put up a sign to warn others about the hole in the bridge. You warn anyone you see about the hole and ask them to help spread the word of caution. You even start offering classes to help people in the community learn how to swim, just in case they do fall in. Finally, you realize that to truly minimize the problem, you have to repair the bridge. You work with others in the community to close the hole. Occasionally, some people still fall in, but there are far fewer people that need to be saved.
So as you saw in the video, there are far too many people to be saved. Therefore, the community put up warning signs, they offered swim classes, and they fixed the bridge to reduce the number of people who were swept away. It really demonstrates how everyone can play a role in prevention, working together in various ways, bringing our individual expertise to the table with one goal: to prevent unsafe situations for a community of healthy, happy, and safe youth. Prevention can include building skills, changing attitudes, reducing risk factors, and increasing protective factors. That could be strengthening families and creating those safe environments. It also is providing access to services, support, and programs, and making policy and legislative changes, using the best available data and information when planning, implementing, and evaluating, a large task that we cannot do alone. So why does school staff play such a key role? All adults can help prevent child sexual abuse. Adults work together to kind of create that network for the youth. Think of it as holding them in our hands. They are our future, they are our youth. The more we can increase protective factors, the less likely a child will experience abuse. Teachers have more access to children than probably any other professional. An educator may be the only one who hears about abuse. You have contacts with the students daily. You can notice those changes in behaviors, spot indicators of maltreatment. You know the students well, and you're often a trusted adult, and you may receive those disclosures. So we want to focus on the 5 steps framework to preventing child sexual abuse. 1, understanding the dynamics is the very first step to understanding how to prevent the abuse. 2, creating safe environments can help reduce the opportunity one has to perpetrate the abuse. Most incidents are happening on one-on-one situations. There are often opportunities to observe and also intervene and interrupt these behaviors. 3, talking openly breaks down the barriers and the stigma surrounding it. 4, the signs of abuse aren't always obvious, but they are often there. 5, it's on all of us to react appropriately when we suspect or know that abuse is happening. So many of you have probably heard of Aaron Marin's law. The intent of this law was really to provide legislative mandates to simply help us implement the steps to help prevent child sexual abuse, knowing how important it is and the key role that educators play in making that happen. So step 1 is simply put, if we don't understand child sexual abuse, we can't end it. It's highly likely that you know someone who has been or is being abused. Kids can't be expected to protect themselves. That is our role as adults. Violence happens on a spectrum and ranges all the way from jokes, harassment, explicit texts, which I'm sure you see in your hallways, to pornography and exploitation, to physical harm and even death. We have an opportunity to create change and intervene at every level. Any sexual activity between a child and an adult is abuse, and this includes a 15-year-old and an adult, for an example, as well. Most of us know that 1 in 10 children will experience abuse before the age of 18. But do we know that less than 40% of child victims ever disclose the abuse that they experience? Additionally, 1 in 7 child sexual abuse incidents are perpetrated by another juvenile. 2 out of 3 under the age of 18 are ages 12 to 17, and the overwhelming majority of perpetrators are known to and most often trusted by the victim. So why don't they tell? Sexual abuse is hard to talk about. Let's face it, sex is hard to talk about. So experiencing a traumatic incident is even more difficult. You've already likely heard today the impact that trauma plays on individuals, and these children could be afraid to tell anyone. They may experience shame from the abuse that's happened, or they may be blaming themselves for anything that's happened. A child who works up the courage to report their abuse may only be able to work up that courage once. And the way that they tell us that may happen in various ways in their own language. We know that so many things impact the success of students in their future. You've heard that today, and child abuse and trauma impact every aspect of a child's life. The CDC estimates that the lifetime cost is over $200,000 per victim. So why does prevention matter? We also know with public health issues and trauma, the long-term effects can be absolutely devastating. Preventing abuse before it happens can be the key to the student's success, and preventing further harm can help create resiliency.
So let's talk about how to minimize those opportunities and prevent the violence. And one of the second steps on the key 5 are safe environments. So we want to remember that abusers take advantage of the fact that they can gain trust in parents and get close to kids and spend time. And so if we have safety rules for everything else, every sport we play, things that we do when we drive cars, we have safety rules for everything. So why don't we have them around body safety, around privacy, around trusted adults? So we're going to talk about those important things this afternoon and break that down. How do we minimize opportunities? So imagine if every child had a trusted adult, someone who knew about CSA, someone who knew the facts, would talk about private boundaries, and knew how to help a child when they didn't feel safe. That's my goal, and that's part of how we're going to change a child's story. So think about and put in the chat for me, if you would, what do you think the qualities would be of a trusted adult? What would some of those qualities be? And then I'd like to share with you some of the things that kids have told us. Any thoughts? Trusted adult qualities. Think about someone that you trust. This goes if you're a child, if you're an adolescent, and an adult. Here are some of the things that kids tell us. Someone who listens. Someone who makes you feel safe. Someone who encourages you to do the right thing. They don't tell you what to do or what to think. They help you make choices. They work with you to find the answers. Trusted adults ask the questions, you can tell me if you have a problem. They let you know that they care, and they'll do their best to answer and find answers to questions. And so you're all right. They speak kindly. They're warm responses, they're nurturing, they're accessible, and they have great listening skills. In fact, what kids tell us is their most trusted adults listen more than they speak. So my question to you is, if we had a child in trouble, someone who didn't feel safe and needed to talk, would you be a trusted adult that that child would come to and seek out? And if you can say yes to that question, kudos, kudos, kudos to you, because this is one way that we can minimize the opportunities of abusers. Here's another. All people have boundaries. So we want to teach about what that looks like for a child. And when we think about child sexual abuse, we have to teach boundaries. Boundaries let us know what's important. No one has the right to come into your personal space unless you give permission. So when a child doesn't want to give grandma a kiss or a hug, can we find an alternative? Can we do a high five? Can we shake hands? Can we do a fist bump? When Johnny doesn't want to sit on Uncle George's lap, are we going to make them? What we want kids to know is that their no will be respected. And then when they become teens, they'll know that it's okay to refuse some of those things that pop up in relationships related to body boundaries. So bottom line, it's never okay for anyone to get into your personal space without permission. Doesn't matter your age. That's a rule. We want to teach about body boundaries. So I want to have you watch a short video clip that comes from an organization that creates wonderful resources around body boundaries and respect. And they're called Educate to Empower. And this is a little quick clip that talks about learning about consent and respect starting at a very early age. Great. So how will they know if we don't teach them? And that's all part of how we minimize the opportunities, because that's exactly what abusers hope for, is that kids won't tell, that they won't have the words, that they won't have that trusted adult to go to get what they need. So part of that little video talked to you about consent. And this is a crux of information that is vitally important. So we want to think about, what does consent really mean in the simplest of terms? It's just permission. We teach folks, young people, adults, adolescents, did you ask? It's a very simple way to teach consent. And when we ask about consent, what we're thinking about is, when should we ask for consent? Across the board at all times. If I have a new car and you wanted to drive my new car, you would have to ask me. Even if you're in my family, you would still have to get consent. For children, if somebody has a new red bike and somebody wants to ride it, don't you need to ask first before you do that? And what about those photos that are getting sent by adolescents? So shouldn't there be some kind of consent or agreement that something could be shared? So we want to teach consent at an early age, and we want to give kids the words and the power and the understanding about boundaries and then consent. So let's look at some words and that mean consent and words that don't mean consent. These are some responses that adolescents have given us when we've done some activities related to consent in relationships. And what we always want to be sure that we do is that we're giving a voice, that we're asking the question, and that we really understand what consent means. And so if we were together and in a classroom, I might shout out to you some of those words that don't mean consent, and I would want you to give me back words that mean consent. So I want you to just kind of read through those, through the list. You can see they're very, very different. Consent sounds like an excited yes. Go forward, I'm ready, keep on, this feels right, I'm giving permission, versus no, I'm scared, stop, no more, I don't want to do that, I'm not ready. Consent doesn't always have to be a verbal consent. We can tell by action. So we want to teach our young people how to respond to boundaries, how to speak up, and how to recognize when consent is given both verbally and non-verbally. Really, really, really important concept that we want to teach. So when we think about ways to minimize opportunities and create safe environments, I think this slide kind of says it all. So when kids feel safe enough to tell you that they need to feel safe, that they need to be calm, that they need help with a problem, that they need to feel cared for, whatever it is. It could be something as difficult and as serious as child sexual abuse, or it could be something as simple as water. But whichever it is, being a trusted adult, creating a safe environment where kids know that they can say what's on their mind, think their thoughts, and express them to you is really such a protective factor, especially against an issue as critical as child sexual abuse. So step 3, talking about it. Talking openly breaks down barriers and reduces stigma. And I can't say this one enough, or I don't want to get on my soapbox about it, so I'll try to be calm, but it is so important that we talk often and we talk about all kinds of things. So if we don't talk about the little things, how do we talk about the big things like child sexual abuse? We know it's hard to talk about. Nikki already mentioned that to you. But what we have to do is go back to talking about boundaries, knowing how to talk about consent. And we want to do it openly. We want to be able to talk about our bodies. We want to be able to talk about the boundaries with a level of consciousness that really sends that message out there to abusers that these kids aren't targets. They've been taught how to resist the pressure and the issue of child sexual abuse. So when we talk about it, there are some special things we want to teach kids. I say kids a lot, but please know that I'm talking about children as young as kindergarten. I'm talking about middle school. I'm talking about high school. And in fact, if you consider many of these things that we're talking about today, they apply to adults as well. This is one of the important ones, I believe, is that we have to recognize early warning signs. We do have a gut instinct that tells us sometimes when things aren't wrong, when things are wrong. I still get these reactions because of a really traumatic experience I had in a parking garage. Anytime I go, I have to park my car far away from an elevator or just go into that garage, my palms get sweaty, my brow gets sweaty, my stomach gets in a knot, and I shake a little bit. It comes back each and every time. Our bodies give us these safety warnings, and we want to teach kids to identify them, to be able to think about what that means when they don't feel safe. And then the most important part is when they don't feel safe, who can they go to talk about the issue? And that's where that trusted adult piece comes in. Not only do we want them to be able to identify those early warning signs, but here's another critical piece to it. They have to be able to talk about what they're thinking and what they're feeling. This is one of my favorite slides, and I've used it a lot. Some of you may have seen it. Instead of saying, I wanted to cry, but I didn't, I want kids to be able to say, I wanted to cry and I did. I don't have to be brave in place of identifying my feelings, but I can be brave and sad at the same time. And so it's critically important that we find space to validate kids for what they feel. Not all emotions are going to be happy and good. Some are going to be bad, but it's okay. But we can't fix everything for our children. Sometimes we'd like to. We can't talk them out of their feelings. But what we want to do is teach them how to deal with their feelings, how to identify them, how to express them. And we, as the trusted adult, try to work with them to be able to help them understand why they're feeling that way. Why don't you feel safe when Uncle George comes to dinner? Why do you not want Mom to leave you when the neighbor comes out into the yard? So helping kids identify and talk about all their feelings is a huge protective factor against child sexual abuse, and one of the things that will help children grow into healthier adults who can communicate those feelings when they get into those more adult relationships. Now here's another one, teaching proper names for body parts. You're gonna hear all of us at Frizz talk to you about why this is a critical step and important factor in reducing sexual violence. Again, abusers are good at what they do, and they count on children not telling, not being able to speak up. I can't tell you how much the research tells us how much more we put our children in an unsafe situation when they can't identify and speak the words that identify correct body parts. It's easier when a child makes a disclosure and they can identify what happened to them or where they were touched versus when they refer to vagina as the hot dog or the cookie. I will never forget the story that we were told by a forensic interviewer who had a vivacious little 5-year-old in her class, and she noticed over a period of time how her demeanor was changing. And earlier in the school year, this little 5-year-old had said in a conversation with the teacher that Uncle Joe often ate her cookie. And cookie wasn't what the teacher thought of at the time. And it was only after lots of conversations that we learned cookie meant that he was abusing her. And it wasn't until her behavior changed that people started to ask the right questions and notice that things were different. So we want, I can't say it enough, to teach recognition of body parts as early as we can. When my grandson was 2 years old, we were at the Thanksgiving dinner table, and he had learned the difference between penis and vagina. And we were sitting around the table, and he went around to each and every person that was there that afternoon and said, "Grandpa, you have a penis. Gramby, you have a vagina." Now, I was okay with that. Not everyone at the table appreciated his honesty and his ability to communicate what he had learned. But I know for a fact that he will be safer having that knowledge and that information because it minimizes the opportunities for them to become a target. When the perpetrator says to a child or tries to touch a child who comes back and says, "Stop that, don't touch my vagina," they lessen the opportunity to be a target and a victim. We have some really good research, if anybody would be interested in seeing it, from some prosecutors who have talked with us about how not having correct body parts has put children at risk, and they've lost cases where perpetrators should have gone to jail, but didn't. The next step in minimizing is this one about the difference between surprises versus secrets. And it's really such a critical part of the grooming process that we really have to talk about it. We have to teach kids the difference between keeping a secret and surprises. So anytime we teach kids that anytime that they feel that keeping something secret is confusing, makes them sad, makes them worried, if somebody is threatening them, that is not a secret that you can keep. Keeping a secret about grandma's birthday party is very different than keeping a secret about touching. And we really want kids to know that no matter who it is or what secret they tell you to keep around safety, around touches that aren't safe or unwelcomed, isn't a secret that we keep. And again, it comes back to that trusted adult. That trusted adult will be the one, if that person exists in their world, that they can talk to about. We tell our young ones especially that they should have 5 people in their trusted safety work or their safety network, and preferably a couple should be that people who are not in the family, because we know the relationship between acquaintances and family and this issue of sexual abuse. So moving to the next slide, I want folks to be wary about abusers and the manipulation and the grooming tactics that they do use. They're good at what they do, and they target our young people who have issues, kids that they don't feel will be believed. They target single families without fathers, kids who are not supervised, kids who have mental health issues or substance abuse issues. So if it sounds too good to be true for some families, that there's a person in your church, a coach, someone in your community who has all this free time that wants to spend with your child, please be leery. Please watch out for those opportunities that find themselves just too good to be true. Someone's so available, someone's always able to help you out, someone always is trying to manipulate and figure out how to spend one-on-one time with your child. I'm not trying to say that everyone is an abuser. I hope you don't hear that, but I do just think it's really important that we understand the issue, and access to children on one-on-one situations is one of the number one safety issues that come up that allow this issue to continue. So if we've taught safe environments, and if we've talked and built healthy relationships with our young people, and there is mutual respect and equality, when they get to be a teenager, they're going to be in a much better position to recognize when they feel safe, when they feel pressured, and what to do about it. And that it's okay to say no, that you have a body boundary that needs to be respected. And when you give permission to someone, you're saying, I respect you, I trust you to be in my space. But when you say no, they need to accept it as a no. So we'll move on then to a fourth sign, which is also as important as the other three in recognizing signs.
Those are such good tips. And I love that you said, like, not everyone's a perpetrator, Debbie, because the people who can help protect the kids are the ones who would be in those same positions to spend time with your children and be there as their mentor and support person. But having that relationship as the adult, talking about, you know, our body parts and naming them. I'm not sure that any of us parents ever feel like there's enough that we can do, or educators. I have 6-year-old twin boys who are getting ready to go to the big school in first grade next year. And we talk about this stuff, and they still come home with stories or getting in trouble for things that are developmentally appropriate, but also areas where there could be a change in the way that, you know, classrooms are structured, so that if we have a policy, that it's being implemented and that we're being consistent, just as Christy was talking about, and you know, reminders throughout all those consent and things that we're talking about. So it doesn't just have to be, you know, consent when we're actually talking about abuse, but instilling consent around different things, like when we're interacting with other kids and teaching the kids when they interact with each other. So those are amazing tips. So thank you. As a parent, thank you to my coworker. So,
Nikki, I would just like to say one more thing that I neglected to say earlier, and it is that whole piece about the trusted adult. Back to that again, is if kids worry that they will get in trouble, and perpetrators feed on that you'll get in trouble if you tell, or there are those threats. And so it's just so critical to talk about things and for kids to know that they can tell you anything and that you'll handle it, that you'll keep calm and cool. You might not like it, you might be a volcano inside, but on the outside, you're doing it all right, and you're listening non-judgmentally, and you're planning your approach to keep them safe. So thanks.
So we talked a lot about recognizing the signs, and for child sexual abuse, you know, it can go on for long periods of time. So the earliest that we can intervene or even stop it from happening when we see some of those signs, that's, you know, really primary prevention. And when those signs are there, we're going to talk about step 4, recognizing those signs, that they're not always often obvious, but they are there. Emotional and behavioral changes are often the most common signs rather than the physical evidence. And again, why they can be so hard to prosecute. Trauma may be the root of what is typically labeled bad or difficult behavior, as we will see with Melissa's story. So we want to track the ABCs. Are there changes in appearance, behavior, and communication? Changes in a child's behavior can certainly be a range of things, and the root cause could be a number of things. There could be a slight change at home, there could be a divorce, anything can kind of spur that on. If you see changes in the ABCs, one of the most important steps you can take is to engage that child in conversation. So we're going to hear from Melissa. She describes her experience, and you may have seen some of these things and made reports yourself. And unexplained injuries, changes in behaviors, fear of going home, poor hygiene, risk-taking, inappropriate sexual behaviors. So let's listen into Melissa's experience.
When I was young, the abuse impacted me in the ways that I was not able to sleep at night. I had nightmares, flashbacks. I was unable to look at anyone in the eye. I was unable to trust anyone. I acted out a lot, having tantrums and a very bad temper. I just didn't want to be around anyone or just around in general. I didn't want to be here. And I would not show up to class. I wouldn't do my homework, which was funny because when they would talk to me one-on-one, I know they could see how smart I was. You just see these certain kids that stand out, these certain kids that act out, and I acted out. It was like a cry for help. It wasn't hidden, it was out there, and I was just waiting for someone to realize I was hurting.
So as Melissa talked about, her behaviors were really a result of hurting. She was just waiting for someone to ask the right question, to check in with her. Sometimes these kids are like screaming on the inside, just needing to take that breath. And making those connections, building rapport, and breaking down the walls can help them navigate difficult and traumatic experiences. I have this conversation a lot with folks who have a hard time expressing their emotions about anger. And I always say anger is just a cover-up feeling. Growing up, experiencing trauma, anger was pretty much my only emotion. That's the only way that I showed things. And I was tough and no one was going to hurt me. And oftentimes that came out as physical violence. Now my coworkers, when I tell them that, they're like, what, Nikki? Like, I just don't even understand, because my whole adult life has been trying to protect children. So Melissa is a great example. When I worked in Child Protective Services, one of the gals, young teenagers, the first time she disclosed she was on probation and she got in trouble. And she finally said that, my dad's touching me. So it can look like and come out in so many different ways. But the more that we talk to kids and check in with them and youth, they may be willing to share with us.
I'd like to say that little clip comes from Hot Talks, which is a Committee for Children resource, and we do have that in a resource guide for you, but there's really great information on how to open up those conversations, keep the conversations going so kids will talk and tell.
One of the areas of recognizing the signs is addressing concerning adult behaviors, and misconduct can certainly happen, and schools or other programs. We've talked about those less than obvious signs, and one area of opportunity to intervene is recognizing these, listening to your instincts like Debbie talked about, checking in. It's important that we listen to our gut when it tells us to stop and question some of those behaviors that we see. If a student's getting a lot of attention from an adult, preferential treatment, these could be signs of grooming. And as adults, we have to be willing to take the risk to ask the adult questions, to stop one-on-one isolated interactions, and if we need to make a report if we're hearing about suspected or completed abuse that's happening. How often have parents, students, or educators heard about so-and-so's behavior around the students? We've heard about questionable behaviors from teachers, coaches, and others, sometimes generation after generation. And if you don't take action, who will? And how many will be harmed along the way? It's truly our responsibility to react appropriately and to respond to suspicious or other behaviors that we're seeing. I love this, the 3 R's of safety that Debbie has always shared. It's recognizing the signs as potential abuse, responding in an appropriate manner, and making that report to the proper authorities. When a child or youth discloses, remember to stay calm, don't pepper them with questions, listen, and believe them. When you make a report to DHHR's centralized intake, as most of you are mandated reporters, provide them with as much information as possible. I was a CPS worker for several years, and I still feel weird when I call and make a report, but I try to stay focused and provide as much information as I can, but also maintaining any confidentiality and privacy or respect of the family or the child as you can. So even if they don't ask you particular questions, the more information you can provide that's important and pertinent, the less likely it will be to be screened out. So if it doesn't meet the threshold of causing concern for a investigation to be done, it can be screened out. And sometimes teachers get frustrated, and I totally get that. When you're making a report after report on the same family, it's like there's not just enough there. But when we build these relationships, get to talking and have more information, that can really help when you're making a report to Child Protective Services. And every time you call, that is logged in. I know one case that I had, there were like 20 calls, and finally we took it to court because it's like, we know if these keep coming in, we need to dig deeper and dig deeper. You can communicate with some of the investigators if they contact you, and you can really help change that child's life.
So most importantly, how do we change the story on child sexual? So I'm going to ask you to put this in the chat if you would. So what do you think the research says is the most significant protective factor for children and adolescents in keeping them safe and healthy? Most important, what would you say? I've heard it in several sessions today that I attended, and I was glad that it's come up so many times. Most important protective factor. Bethany tells us it's having a trusted adult, building trusting relationships. And Bethany hit the nail on the head. Absolutely, without question, the research says that the most important protective factor for a child is that connection, having someone that they trust, that they can lean on. It's also, interestingly enough, it's the highest risk factor for sexual abuse, for all kinds of other issues when we think about the intersectionality of all of these factors around ACEs and trauma for kids. So when we look at the protective factor, we can clearly see it's that strong emotional connection. Vicki, if you can go to the next slide. That strong emotional connection to at least one adult. It's the best buffer from trauma that we can give our children, not only from other traumas, but also from the trauma of child sexual abuse. So I've heard this come up today many, many times, and I'm delighted that we're talking about it, but I want you to think about what helps kids, youth, be healthy, safe, and well. And we really want to focus on how do we identify and build those positive childhood experiences. And if you look at this particular list, you see all the things that we've already talked about in terms of how do we minimize the opportunity, how do we change the story around child sexual abuse. And we do it by talking with our family about feelings. We do it by feeling connected. We do it by feeling supported by our friends, by our family, and that we feel safe. Because when we do all of these things, we are so much more able to learn, to communicate, to interact, and be healthy and well. It's really the little things that we do that make the difference with kids. Sometimes people think they have to do these great grandiose things, but it's really not those things. It's the little things. It's what we say, how we respond. When kids come into our classroom, are we ready to engage with them, or are we busy getting ready for the day? Sense of belonging and sense of connection. So this is one of my favorite mentors, Rita Pearson. If you know Rita's work, please give her a shout out in the chat box. She did the most amazing work, and she did a fantastic TED Talk called Every Child Needs a Champion. And if you haven't heard it, I wish we had time today to play it for you, but we decided that we didn't. But I want you to take a minute and listen. It's inspiring inspiring. And Nikki just put the link for you in the chat box. And she truly believed that every child deserved a champion, that person who would lift them up, build their self-esteem, challenge them to be the best person that they could be. And she did it all very easily, with passion. She's been my hero for a number of years. We lost her several years ago, but her imprint and footprint on education and work with children will stay forever. So remember, you were chosen to be in my class. That's how we build those connections. Human connection is key. Teaching and learning should bring joy. And one of my favorites on this list is to remember that kids don't learn from people they don't like. So let's connect with them and build their worlds. So as we think about changing the story on child sexual abuse, one of the things that we wanted to be sure to mention to you are some of the programs and resources that through our organization, FRIZ, we can offer to you in the classroom, to communities. We do, as Nikki mentioned, we have a child sexual abuse prevention statewide work group that is working hard to bring a presence to prevention. We're going to have a website using the initiative It's On Us West Virginia. We created this one that you see during COVID that has social emotional learning lessons for you, some recorded trainings, information for families. Through the preventionists that work with me in the rape crisis centers, we can provide you with different kinds of prevention programs around second steps. We just recently purchased a new out of school time for after school programming. We just did a coaches clinic for coaching boys into men. Our educators are trained both in high school and college in bystander intervention. All the educators are trainers of trainers and circles of safety. We support and work closely with Darkness to Light. We have some really good, healthy relationship information. And we work closely with the Department of Ed, instituting the toolkit and working on issues of Erin Marin's Law. And Nikki and I will be offering in August a session for elementary and also high school kids, looking at some of the strategies and activities and providing some lessons around all of the things that we know are important around healthy relationships, making connections, and keeping kids safe. So we want to have a little bit of time for a few questions, but I also want to say to you in summary, I want you to think about, of all the things that we've talked about today, what can you do to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse? There's a whole list here, and I would appreciate very much if you would put in the chat what challenge you'll take to try to change the story of child sexual abuse. Will you leave today and talk to someone about anything that we've talked about? Will you ask questions about, did you know the prevalence of child sexual abuse? And West Virginia is no different than other states in the country. It is an issue, and you can imagine during COVID that it increased significantly. So share one thing that you'll do to keep kids safe, if you will. We've talked about lots of them. Some are definitely harder than others, but we do know that together, we can't do it alone. One agency can't do it, one school can't do it, one counselor can't do it, but together we can change the story around child sexual abuse, because we believe, so genuinely believe, that every child has the right to grow up to be healthy and safe. So let's do our part and participate. So we have a few minutes, and we're happy to take questions if anyone has them for us. And if we don't have questions, Nikki, I would encourage, do you think we could throw up the CSA resource sheet and skim down through it?
Yeah, so I was going to say that I did notice those two handouts that we hope to have are in the gallery area. So
oh, good. Okay.
Booth, There are tons of handouts, some things that you could even use, and then there's a whole list of resources. And if you're not sure where to start or what to do, I can't tell you how much Debbie is a resource. And we were preparing for this training, and I was reminiscing about how important teachers are, and I was telling Debbie how meaningful my kindergarten teacher was. I went to Myrtle Beach Elementary, and I stayed the night with my teacher. She was just so wonderful. I had ants in my pants literally one time, and there were like no clothes, and she was just like my little protective person. And when we moved back to West Virginia, my first grade teacher lived down the road from my grandma. We lived out a holler, and she would call my grandma, and she was the only person that called me Brandy by my real name, and she checked in on me, and they communicated often. And that, and having my dad who had great work ethic, all of those things combined create so much resiliency. And honestly, things like the Upward Bound program have gotten me to where I am today. So I am just indebted to educators and those who are putting in extra effort to help kids.
Good. Thank you so much, Nikki. Shout out to all of our teachers, because you are our hope. You are the hope and the bridge to connect all of these dots, but we have to talk. We have to connect. We have to collaborate. There aren't enough resources for us all to do every single thing, but we can do it collectively. You're going to be hearing lots more about the Child Sexual Abuse Prevention Work Group and the opportunities for training, resources that will be on that website. And we're looking forward to sharing additional information come August. And Nikki just was able, thank you so much. She's so much better with technology than I, so I'm so glad. What a team we are, Nikki girl. So thank you. This is just a collection of some of the best of the resources. If you are so inclined and want to do a little bit more, if you've never used the West Virginia Help app that was developed by the Handle with Care folks, there's information here for you. It can connect you with everything important in your communities. Nikki, if you'll scroll down quickly, since I don't have those powers, here are some resources for you. I want to point you and give a good shout out to my wonderful folks at SHIELD. This Reporting Child Abuse in West Virginia, it can get very complicated to figure out, but through the initiative, there is a website there, and I gave you this particular link. It breaks down all of the issues of mandated reporting, what you need to know, what you need to think about. Gave you lots of resources from Committee for Children on how-to guides. There are all the links there for you to download them. Things that make a difference for elementary students, for caregivers, how to talk about these personal things. Here's an infographic, much like the one we use in your handout, that comes from Committee for Children. There are lessons. I think that I checked 2 weeks ago, and they were still up on the Second Steps website for lots of other training and adaptations for teachers to help you bridge and build community as you bring kids back into school in September. And I so hope that everyone will take time to do that. We've got to reorient ourselves. We have to really buy into social emotional learning and think about how we get kids to be in community again. Committee for Children has offered you some options, and I've put them here for you. There are other resources from Darkness to Light, Circles of Safety, and then some national resources mentioned also. All of these things we have checked out. We know they're the best of the best. Here are all the links to the school, the Department of Ed's information on Aaron's Law. And if you have not done those videos, you need to do those videos. They're really excellently done. And then we provided you with an archive of webinars that we did back during COVID around this issue that are excellent and done by experts in West Virginia. And there are resource sheets accompanied with those as well. So we thank you so much for your time this afternoon. We're always available to answer questions, provide you with technical assistance, and get a program to your community and your school if indeed we can be of assistance to you. So thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Debbie and Nikki. I do want to mention that Debbie, and I think Nikki as well, will be with us in August. The West Virginia Department of Education is offering a virtual training the whole first week of August, and there will be 2 sessions. One session will be primarily focused on elementary resources and prevention efforts that can be used at that elementary level. And then the other session will be specifically focused for middle and secondary. So we look forward to those sessions, and we really appreciate your time and those great resources you shared today.
Oh, it's our pleasure. Thank you,
Thank you.
Stephanie. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Check out our booth in the gallery. Thank you. Have a good rest of the day.
Please feel free to join us at 4:30. We have a burst session. That is a 30-minute informational session. So if you're able to stick around, please join us in that next session. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.